Trying to make sense of life can drive you crazy. When I was a child, I believed in God, but I didn't know Him, and I didn't know that I didn't know Him. I was desperately trying to make sense of life all the time. My story starts shortly after birth. I grew up without a father. I was abandoned by my father around 5 or 6 years old, and I used to admire my father because he always wanted his children to be successful at school, sports, competition, and he didn't support a family. He wasn't at home. He cheated a lot, and my mom had to suffer a lot because of him. So she finally decided to raise her 5 children alone. After that, I was constantly trying to make sense of life. I was questioning life by witnessing my mom going to school for a new job to support enough for the family, and also to work at the same time. I was desperate. I wasn't like the same that like other students at my school. I was kind of poor at the time, and I was jealous. And for me, accepting those conditions, I couldn't like help myself but to question life. So I became a bad child at the time. The teachers didn't like me. I was in a school where I was kind of the only black kid in school, and I faced a lot of racism and stereotypes as well. And I was alone. I was desperately in search for a friend, to have games, to be like other kids, but it was just not the case. So after a while, I decided to ask my grandmother, who's a strong believer, to help me in my condition because I thought that my life was meaningless. And she introduced me to one of the Psalms. I don't remember which Psalms, but we were reading Psalms together, and I could relate to King David because King David felt the same thing as me. He was desperate at certain times of his life, and he was in search for help. He was struggling, and he was crying out to God. And at a time for me, God was not a solution for me. But then I decided to read more the scriptures, and I saw different stories that I could relate to. And this is where my life started to change. By praying and asking God for help, this is where I started seeing myself. It wasn't the world that was changing, it was more me that was changing. And this is where I noticed my behavior, and the way my compassion, my love for people, even people who hate me, started to change. So this is how I grew up in faith, and God became my friend, my best friend. And by reading the scriptures day by day, I noticed that I succeed more in everything that I do. So for me, I say that trying to make sense of life can drive you crazy because your sense of life will be based on your emotions. Sometimes you feel good about life, sometimes you feel bad about life. But if you question yourself and search, this is where it's going to go to a straight line to God. And even King Solomon said, fear God and follow His commandments. So this is where I grew up into faith, is by trying to make sense of life, but at the same time searching for God. And I found Him. He was in front of me, but I just like didn't look at Him specifically. And yeah, so my name is Jethro, and I crave significance.